Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Hutchins. I'm a quality lead at Vinted, specifically the Vinted Go thing. And today I'm talking about quality strategy with models, but we'll start this off with definitions. The first definition is actually, what is a model for this presentation? And we're talking about models with regards to thinking models, models which help you plan, strategize, and basically think about the problem, so you're not starting from complete scratch. Our next definition, though, is what is quality? So to start with, how many of you could define quality in one sentence? Yeah, that's pretty normal. In fact, want to see the dictionary definition of quality? This is the most useless definition I have ever seen. But dictionaries have multiple definitions. Surely the next one's nope. But that's metal. That's about metal. We don't work with metal. That's not useful for us. So if the dictionary can't help us, maybe we can look at another industry that might have a very much more clear definition of quality, such as cheese. I love cheese. So first off, if you're a cheese producer, your definition of quality is a cheese that can be produced reliably and economically. Now, how many of us here eat cheese? How many of you, when you're eating cheese, you think about this? Wow, okay, cool. That's cool. But as consumers, how many of us are more likely thinking about things like, is this cheese appealing? Does it offer a characteristic that I give a shit about? I actually don't know if I can curse. This is a definition the rest of us are probably thinking about a little bit more, especially when it comes to things like a cheese that's good for fondue has very different characteristics than a cheese for, say, a cheese board. I don't know about y'all, but have any of you tried to use a fondue cheese for a cheese board? How'd it work? Yeah, not very well. Now, that said, we don't eat software most of the time, I should hope. So how do we take this idea of cheese that's produced economically and reliably combined with the idea of it's something that's appealing to consumers and is consistent to give ourselves a definition of quality we can work with? So that's what I did. I just took it and made it apply to software, where for me, quality is informed confidence that what we're building does the right thing at the right time consistently. So we have a definition of quality. Now for a definition of strategy. This one people probably know a little bit more are familiar with. I'm using the definition of strategy from Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, where strategy is the problem you're trying to solve, a set of tasks or something that you're doing to solve it, and your guiding principle. But then what this particular talk is concerned about is, what are the tasks? How do we put together a task? Anyone can write a task list, but are those tasks useful for what you're trying to do? And that's where thinking models come into play. In fact, there's a lot of them out there. So how many of you have heard of the test pyramid? Cool. How many of you have heard of the Microservices Honeycomb? Nice. How many of you have heard of the JavaScript testing trophy? And how many of you don't like raising your hands? That's me. So two of these models explicitly tell you what they're for. The Microservice Honeycomb, obviously for microservices, JavaScript testing trophy, obviously for JavaScript. But that said, there's a shit ton of thinking models out there. And most of the ones I'm talking about are quality related. So they can be really useful to think about when we're in these situations where we're like, oh, I have to build a strategy. Oh, look, I'm in a new project and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm starting from nothing. I'm in analysis paralysis, or there's just so much going on. How do I focus on what I need to focus on? So to give an example, testing pyramid, which some people here are familiar with, it tells you, it's basically saying, hey, focus on things that give you fast, reliable feedback. Put most of your effort into those and try to save the stuff that's not as fast and not as reliable for only when it matters, when it's really critical. On the other hand, Microservices Honeycomb is like, hey, you live in a microservices world. There's lots of integration. So you need to test more integration than you would in your traditional pyramid. And then my personal favorite, the Swiss cheese method, is actually based on the Swiss cheese method of risk avoidance from other industries. I have a habit of taking ideas from other industries. It's really fun. So to show how you can actually use not just one model, but multiple models to build up a strategy, we're going to build up a strategy in this for using multiple models for a hypothetical scenario. This is purely hypothetical, but it's using processes that we use at Vinted Go for building our own strategies. And in this hypothetical scenario, we're building actually a microservice for a library app, like a book library app, not a code library app. In this scenario, what we're building is essentially a book catalog service, where the library app can query it to get information about the books. Now, I'm sure a lot of us have opinions on the architecture, but that's not part of this presentation. We're just here to talk about the quality strategy. So to start with, what's our guiding principle? Well, we're building for a library app, so we know that outside of our development world, things move slow. So whatever we build has to be high quality, and we need to be able to react fast in case things go badly, because people who are interacting with us outside our world don't have the same ability to move as quickly due to the services and regulations they're under. So let's start. We're starting from scratch, so we're actually going to start with my personal favorite, the Swiss cheese method. We're going to use this to find what quality layers we want to build, and then we'll use other models to figure out the best ways to implement those layers. So to start with, the Swiss cheese method of building a quality strategy session has you start with your personas. This is just a snapshot. I'm sure if any of us took more than 3 minutes, we could come up with even more users with even more needs. But for the sake of this, we're talking about what does the business need, primary need, what do the users primarily care about, like the end users, because the library app itself is actually our user. But that means that the libraries also matter, and we matter. Of course we matter. We're involved in this too. Up next is our integrations. So here I'm just calling out 2 specific integrations and only 2 features, which are important for what we're going over next. First one being the library app itself. It's a bit slow to update because it's actually on the library's physical machines. So updating across multiple libraries takes a bit. But the team who's working on it is in the same group, which is cool because that means we have a closer relationship than we would if they were in some other group. And then finally, we're using a Postgres database, which pretty mature database. I'm sure a lot of us have worked with Postgres before. And we want to be able to update it frequently for a reason that I didn't record. Then next, we collect concerns from the team and stakeholders. And you can actually see from these that we have some groupings, one of them being that Postgres is mature, but our team's knowledge of it isn't, which is also a pretty common scenario. There's concerns about how useful this service is going to be. How often does this need to happen? Is it going to be useful for people? Is it going to slow things down? What does it actually look like? And then finally, someone noted, hey, there's a lot of libraries we're supporting. We need to make sure that it's actually working at scale. And that's a consideration that we have to keep in mind. And this actually gives us the quality layers that we know we need to have. The first one being one that all of us should always have, which is, how do we make sure we don't break ourselves? Because like I said, we matter too. How do we make sure this database that, even though the product is mature, our knowledge of it isn't, how do we make sure we're using it correctly? How do we make sure we're not breaking our consumer who can't update as quickly as we can? How do we make sure that our users are doing things the way we think they're doing things and that it's actually being used in the way we expect? And then finally, how do we make sure that we can operate at the scale we know we need to? So now that we have our quality layers, we can put Swiss cheese aside and instead go on to implementation-based models. As I mentioned, this is a microservice, so we'll start with the microservice Honeycomb, but I like the test pyramid. The idea that things should move fast as possible and that as many tests should be fast should never be completely discarded. So we'll start with our implementation details, ensuring we don't break our future selves. Unit test, static analysis, pretty standard in the industry at this point. Practically every project will have these. So then we move on to the more interesting things that are more specific to this project. The correctness of our database. in this hypothetical example, based on a real example, we decided to actually have integration test against a real database, not production, but the same version of production. That way we could run our integration test, make sure that it worked the way we thought it would, and anytime we wanted to update the database, we could update, run the integration test, and if they passed, we knew we were good. And if it failed, we knew where the problem was and what we needed to change to match the update. Then, contract test with our consumer, because as I mentioned, our consumer can't update very quickly. So we need to actually protect them from us. And if we're in a situation where we absolutely have to break them, these tests will help us show like what it is that's changing and allow us to work together. Because when they update their side of the test, then we should feel confident that we can now push out our update without breaking them. Then, monitoring your actual user usage. It's just a monitor. It's not actually a test, but monitoring is such a key part of quality that if you're not using it, you're actually losing out on a lot of useful information. And sometimes things don't need to be tested, they just need to be monitored. Sorry, I'm not used to winter weather. Then finally, verifying the load capabilities. Simple performance load test. I say simple, but we all know that's not simple. But since we are concerned about the scale, we do want to invest in this. This is the final one. It's at the top of the Microservices Honeycomb. It's the most expensive one, which means we need to only do it around the key endpoints, the ones that we're actually concerned about that have to operate at that scale. And with that, we have a strategy. We use 3 models to make it, and we have a strategy that's going to be pretty decent and serve us pretty well. However, what we're building changes as we build it, so things change. How do you know when your strategy is no longer working for you? Well, there's a couple things to do. As I mentioned before, a strategy should have a goal and a guiding principle. If it's no longer serving the goal, obviously it's not working. But also, since we're talking specifically about quality strategies, we have 2 other metrics to consider. How's your customer support doing, and how's your development speed doing? Because if your customer support tickets are going up and your development speed's going down, it's probably time to rethink some things. And while some of those things are related to things outside the quality sphere is also paying attention to these, especially the CS tickets. And I usually talk about this going back to our Swiss cheese methodology of there's a bucket. Everything that gets through your strategy goes into the bucket. So bugs, unplanned work, maintenance, all this stuff that you have to do that's not feature delivery is in that bucket. And it's okay. Like, we all have buckets, and it's fine if your bucket is under control. But if your bucket's overflowing, it's no longer under control. If you're spending so much time on bugs and maintenance that it's getting in the way of feature delivery, it's time to slow down and look at how's our quality strategy doing, and other stuff like architecture, but that's not the point of this presentation. And that's when we start looking at other models that are more about judging and evaluating. So in this case, I'm going to bring out the testing spectrum, because going back to our hypothetical example about the microservice, we chose a integration test style where we were using real databases. And in this hypothetical based on a real, we found that our integration tests were starting to get slower and slower, and the maintenance cost was getting pretty high. And we were looking at alternatives, and we used the testing spectrum to actually judge the various alternatives against them. And we ultimately chose an in-memory database solution that gave us much faster tests at a small hit to the confidence. The in-memory database had the same, was also Postgres. So we were fairly confident in the syntax. We knew what the version of the in-memory database was. So long as our production database, Postgres, and the in-memory one were working together, using the same Postgres version, we were cool. And we also had our manual tests still used an actual database. It just had a much easier time dealing with the data, and ultimately it couldn't use in-memory anyways for those tests. So we were fairly confident that if there was a discrepancy between in-memory and real, we would have caught it. And we used testing spectrum to make that comparison, along with a couple other options that we ultimately didn't choose. So the ultimate goal of a quality strategy is to keep our development time going quickly and to keep our costs down. Essentially, every layer you use in your quality strategy, everything that you're doing, needs to be worth the cost. Because I'm sure we've all had situations where someone or the project we were on had a big regression suite that took forever and everyone hated. I've been there multiple times. And as a QA, I have the weird thing where I tell people constantly to delete the test because frequently they're not worth it. And that's one of the reasons why I advocate for using these testing models, is they help you. You might not arrive at the perfect solution, but you're probably going to arrive at a good enough solution that you can go from there and find an easier way to tailor it to what you're doing. So advocate for using models. Use your thinking models. And that's it.
Thank you for your talk, and thank you for sharing the cheese methodology. You make me starving. Quick question. How do we ensure quality, and what is the quality model if we are relying? So the model that you're sharing, it's from within the organization itself. Any tips how can we ensure the quality if we are relying from external providers or services? Thank you.
Yeah, so in the industry, there's a couple things out there like SLOs and SLAs that you can put against your external providers. There's a certain level of how much are you testing them versus what are you doing to ensure that they're just doing what you need to do. You can make use of things like contract tests, which we're actually in the process of doing for one of our external vendors because we have had this issue where they pushed something and it broke what we were working on. So we're actually investing pretty heavily into various ways of doing contract testing in order to try to, we can't necessarily stop it, but we can catch it much earlier and have that conversation with them or respond to it.